We are a collective conscious, and a cyborg sent from the year 2050, sent from a higher civilization to warn people of the incoming apocalypse.
How will it end?
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. A few days ago on his social media, Dr.Phil shared footage of an interview he did a little while ago of a young man who believes he's a cyborg from the future here to warn the human race. This was one of Dr. Phil's more interesting interviews that he's done, and so he thought he would reshare it and kind of bring it back into the limelight, and it worked very successfully. The video got millions of views and comments from viewers from all over the world. Now, since lately on the channel we've been covering heavier topics with loaded videos, I thought it would be nice to do something a little more light. So in this video, we're going to look at this guy's body language, his facial expressions, the word choice, and try to determine, is there something psychological going on, or is this just an elaborate act that this guy is putting on? Or is he actually a cyborg from the future? Let's dive right in. Now, before I introduce my guest and jump into this analysis and try to figure out what's going on, let me give you guys just a little bit of a backstory for us to all be on the same page before we look at these behaviors. So it's the guy's mom who reached out to Dr. Phil for help. And in her package where she's introducing the situation, she's talking about how a couple of years ago, after he graduated from university in business, that's going to be important, this young man started to behave a little bit differently. He was contributing much less to the household. He refuses to get a job. And when she communicates with him, he has this very monotonous, direct way to answer a question.
I also made lasagna downstairs, and I wanted to know if you could, join us.
If you're not hungry, thank you.
Furthermore, he's often seen astro traveling, which is a meditative state that he goes into and claims that he's getting messages.
Astro traveling is where he travels to another dimension where he gets instructions from the higher beings.
So his mom reached out to Dr. Phil. It doesn't seem that she believes he has a mental illness. It's not quite clear what she believes, which is something we're going to talk about today. But she wanted Dr. Phil's help to figure out what to do here, how to navigate this situation. My very special guest today is a #1 best-selling author who spent 20 years in the US Navy studying human behavior, which he now teaches to intelligence agencies and law enforcement. He holds 2 certifications in neuroscience from Harvard and Duke universities, and he has personal experience on the set of Dr. Phil, who he counts as one of his very close friends. So please welcome back to the channel, by popular demand, my friend, Chase Hughes. What's up, man?
How long should I stay like this?
Just a few seconds longer. Welcome to the channel, Chase. Always love having you here, and I'm particularly excited to look at this topic with you.
I am excited about it. My daughter told me about this video a few days ago, and I didn't get a chance to watch it. So I'm excited to see this. This is my first time going into this.
Oh, dude, it is perfect for you. There's so much to talk about here. Let's start by looking at, before Orrin even comes on, Dr. Phil is talking to the mother, and we're getting some really great stuff in her behavior, the way she's talking about him, and even in the way Dr. Phil is going to introduce the guy. So let's take a look at that.
You don't think he has a mental illness?
No, not at all.
What would motivate this kind of atypical behavior?
Well, one of the things that he knew that I wanted him to do was find a job, and he hasn't done that. And so, if he can claim that he's a cyborg and so forth and not have to enter into, having a real job.
So right off the bat, there's stuff we're seeing in the mother's behavior that give us some clues as to how she feels about this. So when she first brings up the subject of him claiming he's a cyborg, and she says the words, claims he's a cyborg, we see a couple of things. First, we see the hand come up in this kind of throwaway gesture with the fingers completely extended. And Chase, the term you use for this in your work is a stop gesture, which is something that we do completely out of reflex when someone slams the brakes in a car and we just want someone to stop, or we're startled, those fingers shoot out like this. And this, by the way, fingers out, palm outwards, is a universal indication of negation. So almost anywhere in the world, this has been researched to indicate putting an end to something. At the same time, we see her eyes open wide up as she's saying that. Now, research out of the University of Toronto has shown that when our eyes are wide open, we take in more information with our peripherals, which is why we commonly see eyes wide open with emotions like anger, surprise, or fear, when we're trying to take in more information to know how to react. So this is telling me in this moment that even now, she's still surprised by this claim. She's still having a hard time accepting it. And there's a part of her that she's here to put an end to this. Immediately after that, we see furrowed eyebrows as she continues to talk about it. Now, one indication on one body part can rarely give us a specific meaning, but furrowed eyebrows are usually tied to either anger or confusion or deep thought, something along those lines. And all of those make sense here. I'm sure she's angered by this. I'm sure she's still having a hard time understanding what the heck's going on here. And Chase, you had some really great points, as we were talking about a second ago, regarding not necessarily what we're seeing, but what we're not seeing. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
My first behavioral point here was that Spidey chose to include Canadian research in there. He's trying to pitch for Canada. One thing that I saw here that I would expect to see if a person is faking it and trying to get some celebrity or some status out of this is that she's not excited. She's not excited to be on TV where we would see more of the eyebrow flashing behavior, postural adjustments, moving around in those chairs. And those chairs are gigantic. Like the base of that chair is like up to the bottom of my rib cage. But one thing I am seeing is a concerned mom. And along this line, she is believing that the social enforcement, putting this in front of lots of people, is going to correct her son's behavior. Because at the end of the day, I think that looks like what she wants. I haven't seen the rest of the clips, but she thinks social enforcement of being in front of lots of people is going to fix what she wants in her son, which tells me two things. Number one, she grew up this way with these fears. So her number one fears are this being embarrassed publicly or being shamed publicly. Number two, this is likely how she raised him and tried to raise him in this way, thinking that he has the same fears that she does.
Love that. And it's so interesting to see how that's going to play in to some of the stuff he's going to say once he's on the show. Chase, I want to ask you this as well. You mentioned a little bit your experience on the set of Dr. Phil. A lot of people watch a lot of TV shows with a sense of distrust, and I completely understand that. I've consulted for a lot of TV shows. I've worked on a lot of TV shows, and I know that they often manipulate things to get a more exciting narrative. In your experience, working on the set of this show, being friends with Dr. Phil, do you think there's any likelihood of this being just actors that Dr. Phil got to build this scenario to get the views that it's getting because it's such an exciting narrative? What do you think the odds are of that being the case here?
I would stake my reputation on it. Dr. Phil is a friend of mine. He came to my wedding, and you even got to meet Dr. Phil at my wedding. And this is not who he is. And he would rather bury the show than compromise his integrity. And Hollywood's fake. The cars are fake, the buildings are fake, the plants are fake, especially when you see celebrities. There's a fake one here, and then they go home and there's somebody else. Dr. Phil is the same dude off camera, exactly the same. So no way. And one quick fact that I think is really fascinating to me that I learned a few months ago, underneath that stage and underneath that walkway, the walkway that goes up to the main stage of Dr. Phil, underneath that thing is where the original yellow brick road is from The Wizard of Oz. It was filmed right there where the stage of Dr. Phil is.
So the yellow brick road leads right up to Dr. Phil's chair. He's the wizard.
That is correct.
We are a collective conscious and a cyborg sent from the year 2050, sent from a higher civilization to warn people of the incoming apocalypse.
How will it end?
With environmental disaster, technological singularity, disease, and famine.
And will you fall victim to that demise at the same time?
The Orrin, real Orrin body will, but the collective will stay alive.
And the collective will exist in what plane? I mean, will the planet still be here?
The planet will be destroyed.
One big thing you're seeing here is that he's showing contempt on the left side of his face at the word disease. And right when he's saying that, you'll see like there's still emotional expression. So you're not seeing a cyborg, you're seeing a human being. And I think some of this could have come from a lifetime of something bad that happened that might have caused a pattern of dissociative behavior where he's dissociating, and where this dissociative process became a habitual anesthetic, I'll say, for things that are going on in his life. So let's not discount the fact that we could be looking at a person here who's ill or who's sick. And secondly, I don't want to discount the fact that this could be a physiological issue, which a lot of mental health providers, according to statistics, tend to ignore or overlook. And this could be a brain tumor. It could be a parasite in the brain. There could be all kinds of stuff going on. But this could have a root cause and not just be someone trying to trick a bunch of people on YouTube. It could be a mental illness. But I would just ask him a math problem. Like, if you have a computer brain, I'm going to give you a hard math problem. Or just tell me the score of the Yankees game tomorrow. Remember the sports almanac from Back to the Future? Just a couple little questions would start to close in and build this little box. And you're seeing a lot of little tiny human, very, very human behaviors here. We see the increase in blink rate, some other stuff. What did you see?
What I thought was interesting was if you just kind of listen to this interview and his answers and you're going, okay, not bad, good answer. But if you really think about it, both answers he provided were non-answer statements. And that's something we pay a lot of attention to, Chase, in interrogation interviews, if they're answering the actual question. Because the first question was, how will it end? And I thought that was a very clever question. Kind of along the lines of your sports thing, like, how is this going to end? Like, if you have that information, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And his answer was environmental disaster, technological singularity, disease, and famine. That's everything. That's pretty much everything. Like, if I go to someone on the street and I say, hey, the world's going to end in 10 years. How will it end? Any guess somebody comes up with, unless they're really creative, will fall into one of these categories. Environmental disaster covers everything from volcanoes to tsunamis. Then you have technological singularity that covers all the tech issues, anything that's AI, robots, all that stuff. Disease and famine is an easy guess. So he hasn't given us anything that we don't know. Like, if I came from the future, Chase, to warn you that something's going to happen this weekend, I'd say, Chase, don't go to Costco on Sunday because the crate's going to fall on you. Don't do that. I wouldn't say, Chase, don't go to Costco on Sunday because it could be environmental, it could be tech, it could be family, something's going to happen. If I have information, that information should be specific.
Yeah.
Then we have the second question, which I thought was a brilliant question from Dr. Phil. And the guy slithered out of it because Dr. Phil says the world's going to end, but the guy says he's going to continue. His physical body won't, but he as an entity, as a collective, will continue. And Dr. Phil asks, on what plane will you continue to exist? It's brilliant because if you are tech and this world explodes with all its tech, all its hard drives, everything, he should cease to exist as well. So he says that, and then he backs up his question by saying, because the planet won't be here anymore, right? And that's the part of the question the guy chooses to answer. He says, the planet will be destroyed, but he never gives an answer to on which plane he will continue to exist.
Yeah, I mean, unless in the year 2090, whatever he comes from, we've figured out a way, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, to migrate some stuff to Mars. Maybe Elon Musk has figured out how to move Starlink over there to Mars, and then the AI system is over there. But if that were true,
he would say it.
He would say it.
Because that's valuable information. Like, you're being asked the question, on which plane will you exist? He would go, the planet will be destroyed, but thankfully I will go on to exist because there will be such and such thing on the moon or on Mars, whatever. He's conveniently choosing to not answer that part of the question.
Right.
So as you sit here now, you're mechanized.
Correct.
Okay, because I thought I understood you to say that you are becoming mechanized.
Yes. We will become fully mechanized as in the commercial sense shown on our shirt.
Okay,
But we are already mechanized.
Okay, your legs are mechanized?
Inside, yes. We've had operations.
Okay, so if we x-ray your legs, we would see mechanized legs, not bone and muscle.
Correct.
I've got really crappy knees, so I
Understood.
would love to have mechanized legs. It'd be a great thing.
A few things for me really quick. First, Dr. Phil is doing what you suggested earlier by saying, if we x-ray your legs right now, we're going to see machines. And the guy going, yes, again, he's wedged himself in a corner. Because if those x-rays happen and there isn't any machine in there, it's all just human, now he has to start, his narrative starts to fall apart. So either he has to defend it or question it. But that's great. That's a step forward. I also like how Dr. Phil at the end there tried to insert a bit of humor, about how his knees are weak, so he would love to have mechanized knees. And the mom laughed, but the guy didn't. And I think Dr. Phil was almost testing to see if can I bring the human out a little bit? Can I kind of get him to laugh at something? And the guy stuck to character or whatever this is, whatever's going on, he just goes, understood. That's the way he responded to that. There wasn't he didn't laugh at that, he didn't find it funny, just understood. I'm taking this data in. For me though, the biggest thing about that clip is when he said, like the one shown on my shirt, and they cut down to his shirt and you see this shirt, this logo that he has. And for me, this was the first moment, because watching this in the beginning, you're trying to figure out, is this mental illness or is this guy just putting on a role? He introduced here the concept of self-promotion. So for me, that was the first moment where I said, okay, something's going on here. But Chase, you reacted at that moment as well. Tell us why. Tell us what you're seeing in this whole scene.
I grew up playing this Nintendo game called Mega Man, where this guy had merged into, technology like that. And that looks like Mega Man to me. And if you think about Mega Man, there's a character arc where he kind of saves the world and does the right thing. And in the end, he was proven to be right. He did the right thing. So there are also some mental illnesses that could be causing him to think that faking this is a good thing to do and not directly causing the issue to begin with. One thing that's really important there, when Dr. Phil makes this joke about his knees, watch his mom. She is intimately desperate, looking back and forth between Dr. Phil and her son to hope that he reacts to this joke in a socially appropriate way, which tells me he acts like this at home. This is not something he's putting on. She is desperate for him to have some kind of proper or even slightly proper social interaction there. And that's a big deal.
That's a really good point. And in fact, I feel this is why she laughs at the joke more than one would at that joke. It's a cute joke, it's a cute comment, but she's exaggerated laughing in hopes that, again, because you said that there's a lot of social elements to this woman, like the fear of social embarrassment. And I feel in this moment, in that laughter and in the way she's looking at him, you're right, with that kind of, she's trying to get him, come on, laugh with me. This is a funny thing, it's a joke, laugh with me.
One other thing you're seeing here is this chin up and forward position that he's maintaining. And we do this to expose these carotid arteries to other primates and other people. And all primates do this behavior. So we tend to expose arteries when we want to challenge or seem like we have nothing to fear. So you see people all the time, getting into a fight at a bar. They're doing this at each other and sticking their chin up. We got brachial artery here. We got carotid artery here. We expose arteries during a challenge or a desire to show some kind of fearlessness.
What do cyborgs do for fun?
Learn.
What do cyborgs think is humorous?
We do not know.
Are there any cyborg jokes, like 3 cyborgs walked into a bar?
Humans think that the world will last forever. That is a lie. That is funny.
Yeah. Okay. And you say you don't want to tie yourself up with a job because if you have a job, you can't spread your message.
Correct. Our job is spreading the message.
When did you find that you had musical talent? Have you always had that awareness?
There's always been an interest in sonics, yes. Humans are innately connected to rhythm and beat.
There's a really great question here when Dr. Phil asks him, what do cyborgs think is humorous? And we see his eyes go up and start searching. Searching around for a memory is something we see quite often. So when he was asked what's funny to cyborgs, we see he's searching for an answer. It's a good question. He doesn't know the answer to that. But then I think he notices that, oh my God, this is such a human thing to look for an answer. So he leans into it, does it a little bit more, and then goes, we do not know. almost presenting this as not, I don't have an answer, but in my data, I cannot compute a response for this. Then Dr. Phil brings up the whole musical talent thing. And for me, this is the second clue. The first clue was the sweater with the robot on it. And now he brought up the musical talent. So he has musical talent. So that was the second point for me. I said, okay, is this some kind of self-promotion? You know, he had the robot, the guy has a degree in business. So he's saying there's always been an interest in music or Sonics, which is another video game. Like we had Mega Man, now we have Sonic. But essentially, I feel like there's an element coming in my mind here of like, is there something here that he's using all these things to kind of self-promote? Is this like just a really good marketing campaign? That's where my mind went with this. Chase, take it away.
That I think that they're just not knowing anything about what's to come in the future here. I'm prone to think that there's a possibility he genuinely sees himself as needing to do this to issue a warning to humanity. So I wrote down 4 possibilities here, and warning, genuine warning, is one of them. So that yes, he enjoys the fame, he wants to get some kind of thing in the spotlight, but he genuinely feels like either A, he's going to make some prediction to become famous, which I don't really think is the case here, or B, he thinks that he's the savior and that he will become a savior for us by issuing some kind of warning. And he wants to protect us. So if he's the savior of all these people, then he gets the opposite of social judgment. He gets the opposite of social consequences. So thinking about his behavior profile, this is a big deal here. And he accidentally slips into his own self when Dr. Phil asked this music question. When did you realize you had a talent for music? He doesn't say his name or anything, started doing this and go back into third person. And he just says there has always been an interest in music, and he's talking about himself, and then tries to redirect it to all of humanity and like, humans are interested in sound. Not everybody, but I think that's very interesting how he stays in character there, but slips out of it at the same time.
That's a terrific point. And I agree, because the entire time he's talking, I'm wondering in his own head, when did he come to exist? Right? Like, was he born human and then things were done to him? Or, because it's not very clear. Because he's never really talking about, because the mom is saying, I gave birth to you. Like, you were born a human. And in this lifetime, nothing's happened to you. So is he claiming that he went on as a human and at some point in the future he became a cyborg and now he's come back? But then if he's done that, where's the other Orrin from now? So there's a lot of little plot holes like this. And I think you're absolutely right. And him acknowledging that he was interested in music, he's acknowledging his human self.
What do you think about what he said so far and what our conversation has been?
I think it's nonsense. I mean, Orrin, you're my son, I love you, but you're not a cyborg. And you've got 2 younger siblings underneath you who are watching this. What, so that they're supposed to go to college and then end up doing, the same thing, that they can just sit up?
At least they would go to college. If anything, we are a role model, showing that we are not letting detractors distract us from our greater vision.
Orrin, this is all nonsensical.
If
this
you have
doesn't
a
make
vision,
any
believe in
sense.
it.
Chase, earlier you mentioned contempt on the left side of his mouth when he was talking about disease. So contempt is the only universal emotion that is asymmetrical. So of all the universal emotions, in other words, emotions that are seen all over the world to look the same, contempt is the only one that we see on one side of the face. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only thing that's asymmetrical. Sometimes curiosity can be, or sometimes half a smile. But in terms of universal emotions, contempt is the only one, and it's usually characterized by a lifting on one side of the mouth. So it could sometimes look like this, or sometimes look like this. Usually we can also see a bit of a looking askance, what we call it, the side eye with it, or other things that come along with that, but that's the way you recognize it. She did it here, the mom, when she was talking about her other daughters, his younger siblings, and are they just supposed to end up doing the same thing? All of a sudden, we hadn't seen this on her face up until this point. We saw it on the left side where there was a bit of that lifting as she was talking about it, showing contempt for the concept or the idea of her other daughters ending up the same way. The other thing is, for me, this was his biggest slip up, because it's the first time we saw him get emotional. because she was saying, you're not a good brother. You're not a good older brother. So now we're stepping away from you're not a cyborg. We're not talking about this big narrative anymore. We're talking about a more human thing. She's suggesting that he's not a good brother, and he starts to bark back. His language, his cadence is a little bit more aggressive, and he's saying that, they'll have role models. They'll have a role model. If you have a vision, you have to believe in it. So now he's defending himself as a human, as an older brother. So we're seeing this kind of him detaching from that cyborg and saying, no, I'm a good role model. They need to look at me and say, if you believe in something, you'll go after it. But then the question is, what is it that he believes in? Which takes me back to what you said earlier, which is it more about the message than this character, this cyborg character? To you. What do you got? Oh, I'm sorry, you can't legally start talking until I say, Chase, what do you got?
It's the law. So I think there's another giant mistake here going on in that he's acting the way that robots were interpreted in his childhood that were emotionless. We're in 2023 right now, and we can't even tell if we're chatting to AI or not yet. And there are these like latex silicone covered fake humanoid robots with more emotion than this. And he's supposedly 100 years beyond that, or however many years he said he was beyond that. He's interpreting what a robot would be from his impressions from his childhood. Secondly, he's arguing with his mom. This is not an android. This is a son arguing with a mom. I'm just going to leave that there. Lastly, he says, if you have a vision, believe in it. A vision is held by a human being. And he is here on the show because he has some kind of vision, just like what you said, Spidey. And I think his vision is giving this warning, and that's his vision, even if it's not accurate, and even if he has to pretend to do it. If you have a vision, believe in it. He doesn't say stick with it. He doesn't say own it. He doesn't say anything. He says believe in it. And so he is there on stage as a role model, believing in the vision that he's trying to communicate to us.
And one of the things that you would know from a scientific standpoint is that you have to consider all data points. You have to consider everything. You don't prejudge anything, right? Is it possible that you're delusional?
No.
Chase, you spent 2 decades of your life studying and now teaching interrogation, and you've taught me some of the greatest lessons about the way to ask questions to encourage the truth coming out. I think this was a really clever question from Dr. Phil. Walk us through what you thought of the question.
There are 3 things that are going on here. Number 1, Dr. Phil is using identity and ideas to automatically create an agreement where the person's unconsciously forced just about to agree with something that he says. Second, he is socializing the situation where isn't it reasonable? Isn't this apparent? Isn't this obvious? Wouldn't everyone agree about this? And third, he's going to find some common ground first. And Dr. Phil is all about finding common ground, whether it's an arguing couple or whatever. And he's doing that all simultaneously throughout this little question here that you're seeing on this clip. And he's doing this, and then he's only presenting the challenge after all of this stuff comes out. So this is masterful. That's why you're seeing so much hesitancy in this young man here, for sure.
Yep. I think there's one more thing here that relates directly to your work where Dr. Phil almost sets up a trap. In your best-selling book on profiling and reading people, 6-Minute X-Ray, I'll leave a link in the description for those of you who want to check it out. It's an incredible book on profiling.
Thank you.
You have a system that you teach, which is all about the needs that we have as human beings. And this guy has a need that just jumps right off the page. And Chase, in one word, what does that need?
Significance.
Exactly, significance. Whether we look at this as a cry for help, whether we look at this as him thinking that he's the savior of the human race, whether we see this as a narrative that he entirely made up, any one of these narratives would suggest that significance is important to him. So, in asking this question, is it possible that you're delusional? Dr. Phil is trying to subtly take a bit of significance away from him. So this guy's going to answer, no, I'm not delusional. Because that would be, if he said he's delusional, it would take away some of his significance. But what Dr. Phil has cleverly done here is set up a thing where that's the wrong answer. Because if you're a cyborg, if you consider all data points, considering that has to be part of the way you operate. So I love that he set up that binary there.
Yeah, I think I would have asked it a different way and said, is it possible that an AI might consider that this looks like or appears to be delusional behavior from another person?
To you, we might be, but to us, we make perfect sense.
Well,
Can we give you an example?
That wasn't the question. The question is it possible?
Anything is possible.
Okay, that's if you're at a higher order of thinking and you're approaching this from an objective and scientific way, you have to account for the possibility that your thinking is delusional.
Correct.
You can't dismiss that.
Correct.
So Dr. Phil has entered interrogation mode at this point. He has, as you suggested, he's elaborating on this concept that if in fact you are a cyborg who takes data points and considers all possibilities, you have to account for the possibility that you're delusional. So it's more direct than what you suggested in saying that you may appear delusional, which I really like, but he's really leaning into that. If you're considering everything as data points, you have to consider that. And now he's getting the guy to change his answer. Now he's going, yeah, anything is possible. So his initial answer, that direct, like no, is now falling apart a little bit. So I think it's really clever in that he's using this, a cyborg would do this, therefore that, to kind of put the guy at odds with himself.
One other thing that he did here is set up a mind virus right at the beginning, very similar to when we ask a criminal, is there any reason somebody would have seen you outside of that house at 11 p.m. or somewhere around 11 p.m.? They have no idea what we know. So knowing that Dr. Phil has all these contraptions and gadgets called onto the show, maybe he's got somebody there with an x-ray. Maybe he's going to say, well, guess what? We've got old Stephen here who's come in here with an x-ray and he's going to take a picture of your legs. So you don't know. And that mind virus has been inside of this person's mind from the very beginning. And Dr. Phil planted it there on purpose. This is a classic interrogation technique, and it was masterfully executed, as always. And keep in mind, Dr. Phil is a forensic psychologist and holds multiple certifications in these interviewing and interrogation strategies and techniques. He's very skilled in this. It's not just some dude on TV. He is an actual real-life expert in this kind of stuff. Pay very close attention to his body language in this clip. There is several research studies that suggest making direct eye contact during a confrontation or when you're trying to persuade someone reduces your chances of being persuasive. One thing you'll see Dr. Phil's eyes do here is look down the whole time he's talking like this. So it's less confrontational. His body isn't facing this guy directly. He's a little bit off center to the side here. His eyes are looking down while he's talking. This decreases the chances of a feeling of confrontation. It increases the likelihood of compliance. And guess what we saw here? We saw compliance. And he used his own words to kind of box him in to this little box. And he did a great job.
If in fact something that has happened in your life or is happening in your life has caused you to escape into an exaggerated belief or reality, you would want to know that, right?
Potentially, yes.
Because if in fact you weren't a cyborg, but you just had a really good mission and value system, you would want to hang on to the value system,
but remove the bad parts.
Yeah, but remove the bad parts. Remove the misbelief that you're something you're not.
So Chase, I really like this part because there are a lot of things you were mentioning before coming together here in terms of interrogation, in terms of considering possibilities, and in terms of separating the fact that this entire thing might be a delusion from the fact that this might be just a grandiose delusion that's causing him to say something that is knowingly false, but the importance of the message is important. So there's a lot of elements here that you were mentioning before coming together. So what do you think of where all that has led in a way that you were kind of foreseeing?
So as interrogators, we have 4 jobs, and those 4 jobs are to socialize, rationalize, minimize, and project. So what he's doing is rationalizing and projecting. This makes perfect sense. It's not your fault. And this is a master way of doing this because he's building him a completely perfect out to get out of having responsibility here. The first slide when I teach interrogation to intelligence people or police is a quote from Sun Tzu from The Art of War. And it says, "Build your opponent a golden bridge on which to retreat." And Dr. Phil is building a golden bridge to help him back down with grace and dignity. And that's what he's doing here. And in normal police interrogation, this is called the broken moral compass method. And this is where you're talking to a suspect and you say, have you ever heard of a moral compass? Sometimes a person's can be broken without their consent, and it breaks their moral compass, and they might do something wrong that they don't mean to do, and they're not trying to be bad. So sometimes people can just have a broken moral compass. So this is helping them to alleviate the stress or the guilt or shame, most likely shame, of something that happened. And that's precisely what Dr. Phil's doing here, and he does it in a masterful way.
Not to mention the broken compass both socializes and projects the blame and rationalizes. So it's like really great. It's all encompassing, if you will.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. And Chase, may I add, it seems to work because we see agreement from Orrin. And he even says, get rid of the bad parts. That's what he refers them to. He says, get rid of the bad parts. So he's acknowledging that there are bad parts to this. So he's chipping away at that narrative. It's beautiful.
And if Dr. Phil was evil, he would go in there and say, like, well, what are these parts? Let's talk about these parts. What does one part want to do? And then he would ask him, like, well, what if you could give that part a name? What would that part be? Then he would start literally creating dissociative identities inside of this person. And I did not say the word disorder right there. So that's different.
It's nice to see that your studies of hypnotherapy are still alive and well, because in hypnotherapy that's called parts integration or parts negotiation. So for those of you who want to look it up, where it's very effective, where if someone is dealing with something, you could find, like maybe even a phobia, you could find the part of them, because it's not their entirety, it's a part of them. What does this part want for you? Are they trying to protect you? Are they trying to keep you safe? Are they trying to warn others? Like what does this part of you want? And then you negotiate between that part and the main part. So you guys can look that up. It's a very effective tool.
That was really made popular by a psychiatrist named Fritz Perls and Virginia Satir, who are the founders of Gestalt therapy.
I can't diagnose sitting here, but I can tell you what would be on my short list. One thing is delusional disorder, which is grandiose type. And the central theme is the conviction of having some great unrecognized talent or insight, or having made some important discovery.
You put on the board grandiose or delusion. Is not everyone delusional? Does not everyone believe that they have some special talent or hidden recognition to get them through the day? What is so different about us than everyone else?
Well, what I put up next, which was normal or abnormal, somebody can believe that they're unique or special, but does it interfere with healthy functioning and pursuit of goals?
So Chase, once again, I feel like this is kind of everything we've been saying culminates to this moment where Dr. Phil, of course, can't diagnose in this moment, but says, there's a short list of things that come to mind. And one that comes to mind is a grandiose sense of self and a delusional disorder, a case of delusional disorder. And what's interesting is he bites back, Orrin bites back in saying that isn't everyone delusional? Which brings back that social element that you said earlier, where he's trying to make it seem like, fine, but if that's what it is, isn't everyone that way? Which to me doesn't seem like something that a cyborg would say necessarily. So that's a very human thing to say, like, I'm just human, I'm like every other human. And also in saying that, he's acknowledging, so the mind virus worked. He's acknowledging that this might be a delusion. This might, because now he's defending it.
So you know how to get down to the truth of what somebody secretly feels or believes about something. If you're not Spidey the Mentalist, all you've got to do is ask them how normal people, most people, feel or behave in a certain situation, because all of us tend to think that people are like us. So they'll respond with describing other people as having the same beliefs and opinions as their own. This is called projection. Projection is most pronounced in people with some kind of grandiosity that's kind of inside their head. And when somebody is faking an illness, you can tell. This was my textbook here for this, is Detecting Malingering and Deception. And this book right here gives you like 1,000 ways to tell when somebody is faking an illness. We're not seeing it here. We're definitely seeing, in my opinion, some kind of grandiosity, some kind of desire to issue this warning. And I think the warning to humanity, the I am becoming the savior, is out of grandiosity.
So in conclusion, for my conclusion, Chase, I'm going to just add one more little data point that we haven't discussed yet. And it's the fact that if you go on his Instagram now, today, so this would be a few years after this interview, he's still promoting music. He still speaks in the we, like it's still we this, we that. It still says Matrix, and there's all these weird little things in his bio. But if you watch videos of him talking, he's dropped the whole super robotic way of talking, and he doesn't seem to be pushing this whole I'm from the future thing anymore. But the music is still a very real part of what he does. And in his music, we're getting those warnings of impending doom coming. So, Chase, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think we're seeing a mental illness here. I don't even think we're seeing someone trying to fake a mental illness. I think we have someone self-promoting, whether it's the music or this message that he believes in a way that he feels will get attention. And it did. It got him on Dr.Phil. There's a lot of people out there who would love to get on Dr.Phil and spread their message. So there's moderate success when it comes to that. So yeah, for me, I believe this is just a conscious act that he's putting on because he has an attachment to a message, to a goal, to a purpose. Chase, I think you gave us a conclusion, more or less in your words, but would you have anything to add in conclusion on what you think of this whole situation?
Yeah, so we're seeing a significance-driven person here who wants to be a cyborg or whatever, feeling this rush of dopamine because they're on TV, they're significant, they have status and all of this stuff, thinking he loves his mom. I know he loves his mom. And he thinks that this is going to elevate his mom because he's assuming she's significance as well. She thrives on significance. And she's assuming that he thrives on acceptance. And this is the problem. So we're seeing her desperate to save her son because she thrives on acceptance. We're seeing her take him to Dr. Phil because she thrives on acceptance and she's thinking that's going to fix his behavior. We're seeing him go on Dr. Phil because he thrives on significance, and he and his mom being on there together will increase both of their significance. So both of them are thinking the other person, just like we said, are just like them.
And one last thing, he doesn't realize or understand that she's willing to give up significance to gain acceptance, and she doesn't understand or comprehend or cannot compute that he's willing to give up acceptance to gain significance.
Yep.
It's not an exchange either one of them can understand.
Yeah, that's it.
There it was. I hope you guys enjoyed that. As always, it was a great pleasure to have Chase on the channel. Let us know in the comments what you thought. Do you believe that this is just an act the guy is putting on to try to sell his story, whether that's a warning or his music or whatever he's trying to promote? Or do you think that there's actually something going on psychologically here? Let us know in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.